Are you actually getting a $2,000 Trump tariff rebate check? Or is this just another headline that never turns into money in your bank account? In this video, I'm going to break down what's really being proposed, when these checks might arrive, and who could qualify, including whether kids are covered. And then we're going to zoom out and talk about how this could affect tech stocks and even the crypto markets. So let's get into it. So first, what are we even talking about here? Recently, President Trump floated the idea of a tariff dividend check of at least $2,000 per person, funded by money from the federal government that's collecting tariffs on imports. He emphasized that high-income people would be excluded from this, so this is just a pitch, middle and lower income benefit. His Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, has gone on TV and suggested a working idea. The checks would be limited to families making $100,000 or less, similar to how the COVID stimulus checks were phased out at higher incomes. But he also stressed that nothing is finalized yet. On top of that, there's related legislation like the American Workers Rebate Act, which would use tariff revenues to fund tax rebates. For example, at least $600 per adult and child, with a family of four getting up to $2,400. That bill shows a general direction of thinking, but it has not yet become law. So the big picture is this. Trump wants to use tariff revenues to send checks. High-income households are likely excluded. Congress still has to turn this from a talking point into actual law. So when could these checks actually come out? Well, let's check out what President Trump recently said on an Air Force One gaggle, and that will lead us into the rest of the direction for the remainder of this video.
How much of the cabinet do you picked up by Americans?
I think very little. I mean, I really think very little. If you look at it, and when you add the trillions of dollars that our country is making, when you add the fact that I'll be giving back $2,000 or so to middle-income people, low-income people, everybody but the rich will be giving $2,000 back, and you add that in. When you add the fact that our country is extremely rich and we have no wars and we're respected again, when you add the fact that when China was threatening to us in terms of rare earths, I was able to solve it just by putting tariffs on China, and we made a deal a week later. When you add all of the benefits, the single greatest thing we have right now is the use of tariffs, and I use them properly. For years they've been used against us, and I think, whether you call them tariffs or anything else, if you didn't use them, you really would have an unguarded disaster on your hands.
Well, those $2,000 payments, will that be inflationary? Because previously Republicans have said that sending money to people like under Biden.
Yeah, well, the difference is this is money earned as opposed to money that was made up. That money was made up. Biden gave like the Inflation Reduction Act, which did not reduce inflation, and it wasn't meant to, and they admitted it was a phony name. But they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a fake deal called the Inflation Reduction Act. That was made up money. When I pay people $2,000 each for low and moderate income and middle income people, everybody but the rich will get this. That's not made up, that's real money. That comes from other countries, yeah.
So another part to this also is that we don't know what the Supreme Court's ruling is going to be just yet on whether Trump is allowed to have the presidential powers to execute tariffs or not, or if that needs to be up to Congress. Here's a quick article here. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says we will see about $2,000 rebate checks to Americans as Supreme Court weighs Trump's tariffs. That's going to be the big one here, because if they ultimately say Trump is not allowed to do the tariffs, then we're not even talking about $2,000 dividend checks. So when could these checks actually come? Let's talk about the timing, because that's what everyone really wants to know. So Trump said publicly, as we saw in that video, that the $2,000 dividend checks would come sometime next year, during the year, assuming his plan moves forward. That sounds great, but here's the reality check. Congress has to pass it. Just like the COVID stimulus checks, you don't get money just because the president says so. You need an actual bill passed by the House and the Senate and signed into law. So the details aren't locked in just yet. Even the income cutoff, like that $100,000 income family idea, that's still described as officials as under discussion, not final policy yet. And there's going to be legal and budget issues, right? Some of the tariffs that are being used as a funding source are themselves being challenged in court, just like we talked about. The Supreme Court is weighing on this issue. And budget watchdogs estimate this kind of program could run in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year, depending on how broad this is for the tariff rebate checks. So as of mid-November 2025, the most accurate answer is this. The earliest realistic timeline is sometime next year if Congress passes the law and if the legal challenges in budget math don't blow it up. No law and no checks, right? My guess is we have midterm elections in November 2026. I could see them throwing out these checks to American families probably sometime in the spring or summer. So that way these tariff rebate checks are fresh on the American voters' minds, because obviously Trump wants everyone to vote Republican, right? He wants them to vote for his party, get his people elected so the Republicans can maintain control of the House and the Senate. Okay, another question that everyone, including myself, wants to know: will these tariff rebate checks include children or just adults? So right now there's two overlapping ideas that are floating around here. So when Trump says at least $2,000 a person tariff dividends, okay, his language says per person, but that could be interpreted broadly, but he hasn't clearly spelled out if that means every adult, every taxpayer, or every household member, including children, just like the COVID stimulus checks. And number two is the American Worker Rebate Act model. That's a separate proposal backed by Senator Josh Hawley. That would pay at least $600 per adult and per child. So that explicitly includes kids. So the example I gave earlier was a family of 4 would see $2,400. But because these are just ideas being discussed, nothing is finalized and everything's still kind of up in the air. But I will keep you guys posted as soon as we hear more on the exact details on these tariff rebate checks. So the honest breakdown is we don't have final language yet. There's precedent for children to be included in the COVID stimulus checks, and also officials are talking about income-based limits, okay? But not yet about the exact per child amount. So if you're still wondering, will I get a $2,000 check per kid? That has not been promised. And kind of the cleanest way right now to say it right now is this, that expect some kind of income-based relief per person or per filer, but don't bank on $2,000 per child just yet unless Congress puts that in writing. Okay, and who's likely to qualify on this? Families that are making around $100,000 or less would be fully eligible. Anything above that, benefits might be phased out, similar to the COVID stimulus checks, where they kind of did it based on income brackets, would determine how much you would actually get from these. And obviously this would be for just citizens. Just like we saw the COVID stimulus checks, these rebates go out to U.S. citizens and resident taxpayers with valid social security numbers. So high income earners, however you interpret that, maybe you're making $500,000 a year, right? In Trump's own words, those people would not qualify for the tariff rebate dividend checks. Now, the format of the payment, some proposals talk about this being a refundable tax credit on your 2025 taxes, meaning you'd see it show up when you file potentially early 2026. But until Congress actually passes a bill, all of this is just best guesswork based on public statements and draft proposals. Fact checkers and budget analysts keep stressing that nothing is guaranteed just yet. Okay, now let's get into the juicy stuff of what this channel is all about. How could this impact tech stocks, okay? So if the government really sends out $2,000 per person to tens of millions of Americans, that's a huge consumer stimulus. And here's how it will connect to tech. More disposable cash means more spending on gadgets and subscriptions, okay? Extra money often flows into phones, laptops, gaming, streaming services, and online shopping. The benefits of big tech names directly tied to consumer demand. Think hardware makers, e-commerce platforms, and subscription ecosystems. Wall Street tends to front run these kind of things. Markets are always forward looking, right? There's a lot of speculation involved. So Trump's stimulus checks, okay, expectations, including these checks, are already partially priced into stocks, especially consumer and tech related names. If the checks actually happen and are very big, you could see another leg up for sure. If the checks don't happen or get watered down, there's risk of a pullback because markets have already priced in the good news, essentially. So none of this is financial advice at all. But in a bullish scenario, we could look at this. Stimulus checks go out. consumers spend a good chunk on it, and tech earnings look better than they otherwise would have. In a bearish scenario, the checks get blocked, delayed, or drastically reduced, but higher tariffs and uncertainty stick around, and tech volatility will increase as markets reprice their expectations. And now the fun part that I love to cover, the crypto angle of all this. Anytime there's a talk of free money or stimulus checks, crypto traders perk up, and for good reason. Risk on behavior. Historically, when people get unexpected cash, a portion of them take higher risk bets on things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or speculative altcoins like XRP. That was visible during some of the COVID stimulus waves where retail trading and crypto volumes spiked. And when we look at the macro narrative, tariffs, debt, and fiat, on one hand, Trump is saying tariffs made the country wealthy, and that is dividends can be funded without any kind of new borrowing, right? On the other hand, people point out that the U.S. already has a huge national debt, and these kind of programs still effectively rely on the broader strength of the dollar and the U.S. government's capacity to tax and borrow. Crypto investors often interpret any large politically driven payout as another sign of fiat instability, which can fuel the narrative for using Bitcoin as a hedge. Market expectations are already forming, as we see, just like stocks. Crypto markets are also forward-looking. If traders believe a massive consumer stimulus is coming, you could see speculative buying before checks even go out, sometimes months earlier, followed by volatility if reality doesn't necessarily match the hype. So my opinion, but not financial advice, take is this. If these checks become real and go broad, you can expect a spike in on risk on behavior assets, including crypto. If they stall in Congress, you could see a disappointment dip in both tech and crypto, especially if traders were leaning heavily on the stimulus narrative. Always do your own research and don't build a crypto strategy on a bill that doesn't exist yet. Let's wrap this up. So yes, Trump is promising $2,000 tariff rebate checks for most Americans, excluding high-income households. No, they are not guaranteed yet. They still require Congress to vote and approve on this. Legal clarity, budget math, that works. It's unclear whether kids will get the same amount as adults or if anything at all, but previous proposals do show us that they could very well be included in this $2,000 per person check. If this happens at scale, it could act like another round of stimulus, boosting tech stocks and potentially adding fuel to crypto markets. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit a like, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to Next Shift AI for more deep dives where policy, tech, and money all intersect.